Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here doing a Guy on Games review for Mirror's Edge Catalyst. This will be my spoiler-free review. I will do a spoiler review. It probably won't be until like way later tonight because I'm going to have to head to work pretty soon after I finish this video. But I wanted to do this because I recently finished the game. I finished the story 100% just last night. And honestly, this game kind of disappointed me. I love the first Mirror's Edge game, and you know what? I should say this before I even get into it, because a friend of mine, when I was doing my live stream, was surprised when I mentioned like how they did the story. This game is not a prequel, so for anyone who was still confused like and thought it was a prequel, this is not a prequel. They were kind of making it seem that way when they first announced like, oh, it's kind of a prequel, but it's sort of a reboot. This is just a flat out reboot of the game because they have elements from the original story, like specific characters, and it's just totally different, like who they are in the game and how it plays out. They give us more detail about Faith when she was younger, which is the whole prequel thing, and I think that's why they kept throwing that out there, like, oh, it's kind of a prequel, kind of a reboot. It's a flat-out reboot, just because we have more information about Faith when she was younger. It does not make it a prequel. It's a full-on reboot. It is not the same thing at all. Like, even the start of the game and where things take place when Faith, when you first pick up the story with Faith, it's different than the first game. Like, the stuff that they have and the connections that she has with characters and how certain things happened and certain characters even existing, that stuff is not in the first game. So this is a complete reboot. It is not a prequel. So if you like the first Mirror's Edge, that's its own thing. Sadly, it's just by itself because, of course, they've done this now, and it wipes away that first game, which really sucks because, honestly, going through the story, I like the first one better. I like the story to the first one. I think it's much more entertaining just because of certain elements and how they did the relationship between Faith and other characters. There's a nice little twist at the end of the game, which you may see coming. I didn't personally when I was, first playing it when I was younger, but going through that, I was like, okay, this is enjoyable. I like learn a little bit about the world and stuff, and we learn about Faith, and we learn about her family and her connection and things like that, and it's just different. Like, they utilize some of the characters. I think really only one of the characters. It's been a long time since I played the original, so there's some elements to it that are the same. Like, the main enemies is known as Krugersek in this. I don't believe they're called that in the first game, but it is like a conglomerate, and it's like this evil corporation that's going after the runners because they're trying to kind of silence the people a little bit. So it has that element which they brought from the original. Faith as a runner obviously is brought over from the original game, and her knowing other people and having like a hideout and stuff, that's expanded upon, which I actually like, because the first game you don't actually get to interact with anybody except for like two of the characters throughout the whole game. I think you run into, like, Faith has a sister in the original game, and Faith has a couple of friends, and she has a couple of friends in this one, but I think they're more fleshed out in this because you actually get to see them. In the first game, all the cutscenes are like 2D animation, so we see them in cutscenes, and that's it. Like, you see Faith's sister, and you see one of her friends, and I believe the final boss you actually see, because they do have in-game cutscenes as well during the missions. And I think those are the only three actual talking characters you see throughout the entire game. Other than that, if anyone's talking, it's either over intercom or it's in like 2D animation, so you don't get to like really attach yourself to these characters because it's just like, oh, they're shown somewhat in passing in like 2D animation. And some of the characters, like some of her friends, are shown more even than the leader, which the leader gets a fairly big focus in this, and I thought that was actually kind of cool. We get to see who the leader of the runners are and stuff like that, and there are other sects of runners, and I thought that was a cool element to add to the game for sure. I was like, okay, it's not just, oh, these people are runners and that's all there is to it. And it is even a little different because it seems more illegal in this game to be a runner than it did in the original as well. So I thought that was interesting too. Like, they seem more like sort of a rebellion type of group, or a rebellious type of group, compared to the first game where it's like, it kind of just seems like their job. They just aren't supposed to be doing it on the rooftop sort of deal, and they're just kind of like having fun. This seems a bit more serious, where it's like, this is flat out illegal, but we let them slide. Like, they even say that early on, like, the conglomerate, or Krugersek, like, lets runners, have their time on the rooftops, as long as they don't, mess with stuff. They kind of let them pass. It's not exactly legal, but it's like, you know what, they don't do us too much harm. We let it go. And in the first game, it seemed like you are not meant to be a runner whatsoever because it's completely illegal. And this is more of a full-on rebellion sort of deal, and they're just like, oh, we're breaking the law and having fun. And this is just like, we gotta watch out because they're trying to kill us. So it's a bit more serious in this game, I think. In an odd sense, it's like they're a bit more rebellious, so it's not just 100% illegal, but with them being sort of the rebellion type, they do harsher things compared to the first game where it's like they're just doing their jobs as runners, but it's illegal. And this is like they're really doing illegal stuff, and then the other sections of runners do certain illegal stuff that's pretty crazy as well. So that element I actually enjoyed, but overall, like there's just elements to the story, like honestly, and I knew it, especially if you played the first game, you know what's gonna happen, and it's like, oh, this person showed up, I bet this is gonna happen, and it's like, yep, that happened, and then this happens to one character, but I bet this actually happened, and it's like, yep, and that's it. But there is one twist in there, with a certain character. I was like, oh, that's a surprising twist, and it was weird that they did it that way. But I actually thought that was a nice surprise that they pulled off for that one. But overall, I think the story for the first game was more entertaining. I was more interested in where that story was going to go, having a sequel. This one does end with, it's not exactly a cliffhanger, and technically neither was the first one, but it's cliffhanger enough where it's very clear they left it open. It's like, you find out this thing in the first game, like you find out this revelation, and I still won't spoil. I don't know why I'm not spoiling that because it's super old now. But in the first game, you find out a certain thing, and then it's like, holy crap, and that's the end of the game. So it's like it's totally left off there. It's like, crap, I didn't see that coming, and then the game ends, and so it's like, oh, I can't wait to see where this picks up and how this ending transitions into the sequel. And then in this, it kind of goes through, and it's a bit more contained because it's not as big of a cliffhanger, but it's kind of like, okay, it's very clear that there are certain things that need to be said and there are certain things that need to be done between certain characters, and it's just kind of left open. There's like zero resolution, and the way that they ended it was like, okay, our plan is to say this, this, and this, and then sequel. And I don't know if they're going to get a sequel. I want them to, just like the first game. Wanted it more in the first one because I didn't enjoy this one as much, story-wise. So, obviously that's how they ended it. It was like, alright, this is clearly meant to be a sequel. And I was hoping, because I was doing a live stream, I was like, I hope this doesn't end on like a cliffhanger because that's super ambitious. Because they barely made this game to begin with. And that's how they did it. And like I said, it wasn't like the first one where that was like, reveal into the game, like, an actual full-on cliffhanger, like this is a big revelation, and then the game ends like 2 minutes after. There's like a little bit extra dialogue. This was fairly, a bit more contained, but there's still just so much between Faith and there's specifically another character that she needs to have more of an interaction with because she doesn't really interact with them at all. And it's fairly left open. It's like, obviously they did nothing in this game, so they have to have it in a sequel to figure out how that is going to work out, how she's going to resolve that issue that she's having. So I hope it gets a sequel. I just don't think it will, because probably worse, I don't know, I'd have to actually, check the reviews against each other, but, it's gotten kind of the same reviews. It's like, meh, it's not really that phenomenal. And I think what made it worse is the fact that it's open world. I think, oddly enough, it kind of takes it down. When a game isn't super amazing and entertaining, it really shows when it's open world. When you have a game that's strictly linear, this game could have been perfect. If this game was like the first one, I think it actually may have been a little bit better because it had more like big action moments where it's like, there are like some drastic changes as you go through this story, and I like that. And that's one of the things about the story I really enjoy. It's fairly fast paced. If you like just do the story stuff, you actually have some pretty big moments. It's like you find certain things out about Faith and how, because the game starts off, and this is, not a spoiler, literally the game starts off and it's her getting back into the world because she's in prison. And as it goes through, it's fairly fast paced. It's like, of course you learn, as the player, you learn the basics, but it's like, alright Faith, you've been gone for a while, let's see what you got. So they have you go through the basics, you meet characters and stuff, you meet other runners, you meet older, former runners, you meet the boss. You learn about this other character that's kind of like, sort of like an anti-hero type of character in the game. So you learn the characters fairly early on. It's pretty simple. You go through, and things just keep escalating until it starts to fall apart around these runners, and they have to do some really crazy stuff, and they find out really crazy stuff, and they have to like save all these people, and so it's super fast paced. If it was like solely linear and it was just like the first game where it's like, okay, we have a linear game, but the levels themselves are fairly open. They're like, the sort of sandbox linear sort of thing where it's just wide levels. So it's like you can go up, you can go forward, you can go down or whatever, and they don't, like it kind of works in that sense. But when it's just open world, it's like, oh, I can do this, and then I can go over here and do all these side missions. When you do that and it's not that entertaining, you feel that really early on. It's like, I'll do a couple of missions, and I suck at the missions too, and that's another thing that I don't like about this game. They didn't do, I think, the runner's vision. I personally don't think it was done very well, because they have 3 different versions of it. They have full runner's vision, where you hit the button and it sends like a trail, and there's like a actual like running figure that sets off in front of you. Then they have classic mode, where it's like a little trail on the ground, and they have, in all these modes except for the final mode, they still have like the red items. And then there is the final mode where it's completely blank, and so the world is just how it looks, so there is no guides or anything like that. But what they did wrong, I felt, was with this open world, they didn't put enough stuff in red. Like, only a couple of things show up in red. Like, you do a bunch of missions. For me personally at least, I have to do like side missions multiple times because you're on a time limit, and I have no idea where to go, and I have to keep pressing the button and be like, I don't know where to go, because you'll run around a corner and stuff like that, and it's like, I don't know where to go. Nothing is red in front of me, and then I hit the button and it's like, oh, go up this and go up that. It's like, why didn't the wall turn red, or why isn't there something here that can be red? Like, they put arrows in the game as well, so they have like little parts where it's like, oh, run up the wall and stuff like that. And it's kind of annoying. It's like, well, the point of the runner's vision is to see where you're supposed to go. Like, you see whatever you're supposed to get through in red. You see the doors, you see pipes, you see like air vents and stuff that you're supposed to leap off of. But you take a mission, and like you'll take an item from someone, and it's like, all right, you have to do this delivery mission. So I'll take an item, and I'll spin the camera around, and I'm like, there's nothing red. Where am I supposed to go? And I'll hit the button, and I'm supposed to go like straight up. Like, I'm next to a wall, and the thing just goes straight up the wall. It's like, the wall couldn't just turn red, like, hey, run up the wall, or just show arrows, because they have that when you're supposed to wall run. They'll have arrows that kind of point, like, they're on their side, they're on the wall, they're going like forward. But they don't do that when you're supposed to run straight up, and I felt like that would have been the simplest thing to have. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But also, when you're just running, when you're supposed to just go from point A to point B, and it's like, oh, you run this way and then go right, you just have to keep pressing that button to figure out where the trail is going to go. Like, I keep clicking it as I'm running, because you're looking at this open expanse, and it's like, there's nothing white in front of me. There are a million things that could be white. It could be like just sections. It doesn't even have to be like a whole thing. Like, if they just put it in the code somewhere, you look at whatever is supposed to be red. If you're supposed to run up a wall, just make a little bar on top of the wall red. And it's like, okay, that's a clue or something like that. It doesn't have to be like the whole wall, or maybe have the wall sectioned off, and so you can make one panel completely red or something like that. But you go through this game, and you'll be running around stuff, and it's like, I don't know where to go unless I keep clicking this button. And I feel like that's so pointless. It like negates the fact that you're using runner's vision, because it's not doing anything, because there's nothing to see. Like, they didn't put enough stuff in red to give you cues as to where you're supposed to go, because I don't want to use the little trail. I want to actually just keep running, but I have to like click the thing, like I'll guess where I'm supposed to go because I'm just assuming, because it's an open world, so you look at stuff and it's like, well, clearly I can go left or right, or I can wall run on this and grab the pole and swing and go right, like completely right instead of like diagonal right across to another building. So with it being open world, I felt like they really should have worked on that a little bit. Like, there were not enough cues in this world, because I shouldn't be able to run 30 steps before something's red in front of me. Like, that just doesn't make sense because I don't know where to go unless I keep clicking that button. And that shows me, because the mode that they have where you turn the runner's vision off, you can't possibly do, you can't do side missions if you do that, because they tell you where to go, and even if you know where the dot is, you have to go the specific path because they give you the shortest path that you can go to make. So it's not like, oh, you have this amount of time, just make it there. It's like, no, you have to take a very, very specific path. So unless you know it by heart, you can't turn it off and do side missions. Like, you have to have that thing on, at least on classic, where you hit the button and it shows you like the little line goes across the ground and stuff. That's the only way you could possibly do that, is by keep hitting it, or you just know exactly where to go. So that really bugged me. I was like, there are not enough cues in this world where like this should be red or that should be red. And they have that in certain areas. Like, there would be parts where I was stuck and I was like, I don't know where to go. And I'll hit the button and it'll show me, and I was like, oh, that was red that whole time. And it makes sense because it's not meant to just be like, this is red, go here. It's not, it doesn't have to give me the answer every time. Sometimes it can be like, you know, and this was on top of a piece of glass too. So of course there's nothing there. It's just a piece of glass, and there's like a little space, and I didn't look up to see that there was a little red bar there for me to jump over. And I felt like they could have just had just that. That's all you need, is like a little red line or a little red bar, and it's like, oh, I just didn't look to see where it was, and that's why I was missing it. And that's one thing. Like, when it's there and it's hidden, and you know, and that makes sense because not everything's going to be blatant out in the open. That works for me. That's totally fine. It was like, oh, I just missed it. I couldn't figure out how to do it, so I used the runner's vision. I used the little trail, and I watched where that went. And it's like, oh, that was red, and I totally missed it. That's fine. But when there's literally nothing red whatsoever, and you just have to guess where you're running, or you have to keep clicking the button as you're running to see, like, okay, I have to jump over this thing and over that thing. All of it's just black and white. It's like, there are a million little squares and cubes here. Nothing turned red for me. Like, the stairs weren't red, this wasn't red, that wasn't red. It's like I was doing a mission yesterday. The only thing that was turning red were like banisters. Like, I was running over like apartments. I was running from apartment balcony to balcony, and it was like, okay, so there's a little red line on top of the glass here for me to jump to the next balcony. And then there's this little garden section with a bunch of plants and stuff. I think there was one cube was red, and I jumped over that. Everything else was literally just the normal colors. It was like pink trees, white stairs, and like black walls. And I'm like, I shouldn't have to click this button to know to run up these stairs. Like, the stairs could just be red, or you know, there could just be arrows on the stairs, or like one of the steps is red, something. But it was like, nope, just leave it completely blank. Just keep clicking the button to figure out where you have to run to. And that like breaks the point of this game, where you're supposed to look and see where you're going with your runner's vision. And that really, really bugged me going through specifically the side missions. Like, main missions, I didn't have too much of an issue because it was basically just get from point A to point B, so it was fairly open world anyway, and it wasn't that big of a deal. I would use it sometimes just to be like, alright, well, what's the fastest way to do it just to use up less time? But for the most part, the missions themselves were fine. It was like, alright, I just have to get to this marker. I'm just going to have fun. I'm just going to run from building to building. But when you do side missions, and it's like, you have to get, you know, there within, you know, they give you like a minute. All the things are like, I barely make it because I kind of suck at them in general. So I always make it. I've only made like 2 or 3, and I always make it with 1 second to go. And one time I made it with no seconds left. So, you know, with those, is like, you have, like, they just needed more cues. I shouldn't have to keep clicking that button. So that was my biggest issue with the game, was like, they have runner's vision. That's the point of the game, is to know where you're going with runner's vision. But they didn't implement it good enough. They just left it open world, and it's like, yeah, just make that one thing red. Like, I just took 40 steps, and now something turns red to be like, this is where you have to go. Like, it's too late. Like, I should have had that, you know, 20 steps ago. Like, I can understand if I'm going straight towards a bunch of stuff, but you're running around corners, sliding and jumping over, and it's just a huge, you know, deal. And that was like the biggest issue for me. So that was like my main thing about the game. The story itself, like I said, I don't like as much as I like the first one, and I wanted to do my spoiler video. I'll get way more into that. Like, I didn't want to get into the story because there's stuff from the first game which will be spoiled in the spoiler video, because I'm going to talk about the specific story elements from the first game that were carried over and how they changed them or how they kept them the same. So if you haven't played the first game, you will get spoiled for that if you watch my spoiler video for this one as well. But overall, I'd say it's still a fun game to have. Like, I still enjoyed it when I first got it, but like I said, the story, like, this game should have been linear like the first one. Or it shouldn't have been open world, at least. It should have been that sort of linear sandbox style where it's really big levels, but not a big open world. Because it was fairly boring. They didn't do multiplayer like I was hoping. I was like, I highly doubt they're going to do it. And unfortunately, I was right. But it was like, it's going to be multiplayer. I was like, this is going to be stupid trials. And that's exactly what it ended up being. I was like, I would love for this to just be open world, where you get to play with other people. I don't know how that would work, but that was obviously before the game came out. So I didn't even know what they were adding to it. But they didn't really add anything. You just run. Like, everything is running. There's not much to it, really. So, you know, I'd say wait until it's on sale. I bought it for $60 because I was so excited because I really loved the first game. And so I was so happy to get this. And it just disappointed. Like, I'd play it for a bit and I'd get bored. And even with the story, I'd get a little bored because it's like there's so much other stuff to do that I want to do the other stuff, but it's boring. And you don't do it, and so you just end up doing the story and stuff. But I want to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below. Let me know favorite parts, least favorite parts. Like I said, I'll do a spoiler video later tonight. So if you want to wait and save your spoiler comments or questions, you can just save them for that. Or if you want to put them here, just put spoilers, you know, of course, before you put the actual comment. But want to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below. Let me know. And thanks for watching.